Hello everyone, I am Karuna and I welcome you all to my channel. In this tutorial, we are going to learn tuples. A tuple is an immutable data type that can store values of any valid data types of Python. Let's have a look at some of the valid tuples. The first one is an empty tuple, empty brackets with no elements. Second is a tuple with one element. To create this tuple, make sure you add the comma operator after the first element. Next we have tuple of integers, tuple of all strings values, and tuples of all mixed values. As you can see in these examples, it somewhat looks like list, just a basic difference of parentheses and square brackets. So let's have a look at some of the similarities between tuples and list. Just like list as well as strings, we can have negative and positive indices in tuples also. Slicing, which is used to extract some part of the data type, like in list and strings, can also be applied on tuples. Membership operators, which are used to check whether an element exists inside a tuple or not. Replication operator, which duplicates the value of a tuple. Concatenation operator, which will join two or more tuples. And the last one is the use of relational operators to compare two or more tuples. Now we have differences between tuples and list. Tuple is immutable, which means the individual elements that are stored inside the tuples cannot be modified, whereas in case of list, as you have already seen in the list tutorial, we can work on the individual elements, we can modify them at their place itself. The same thing is not applicable in case of tuples. The elements of the tuples are enclosed inside round brackets, or you can call them parentheses, whereas list elements are enclosed inside square brackets. Here is an example of a tuple with one element, and to create a list, you do not need to add the comma operator. You can simply write one element inside the square brackets and you can have your list with just one element. Now let's proceed further towards creation of tuples. So first let's create an empty tuple by having those empty parentheses. Another way to create an empty tuple is with the help of tuple function. To check the values available in your tuple, you can print your tuple and see the output. You can also use type function to check the data type of your variable that has been created in different ways. Now next is to create a tuple with one element. So before I show you an example of adding comma operator, I will just put one value inside these parentheses. Let's see the type of my tuple now. It is integers because 2 is simply considered as an integer value and stored inside the mytup variable. If I print mytup, you will see that there are no parentheses. It is simply an integer value. Now I'm going to create a tuple with one element. So I'm adding this 2 comma. Whenever a tuple is printed, it will always enclose its elements inside brackets. So in the above example, 2 was not inside the parentheses. That means it is not a tuple. Now to create tuples every time, you do not need to put parentheses. You can also write the elements with the help of comma operator, and this is your tuple. Let's have another example. My tup equal to write in some elements like this, and let's see my tup. Now here is one variable. After equal to, you are putting in multiple values, but they're all stored as different elements of a tuple inside the variable. Next is using the tuple function to create a tuple from different sequential data types. Now I'm going to consider a string and make a tuple with this world. Now let's see the variable contents. All the letters of this world have been changed as individual elements of your tuple variable, and they are enclosed inside parentheses. You can do the similar thing with the list also. Now let's use input function and try to change all the elements into a tuple. So I'm using this input function here. The elements that I'm going to input, they are not separated by comma, no space is there. When the values are entered like this, the input function, whose default format is string, that means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 will be accepted as string value and then stored inside the variable myTup. Now this tuple will take the string type values and will convert them into a tuple format. Let's check the contents. So all these digits, they have been treated as strings because of the input function. The tuple function just tried to put them as different elements and they have been stored inside the variable. You can also use eval function. Let's see how we are going to do that. So now I'm writing eval input. With eval, you will have to make sure that you input values the way you want. So now because I wanted a tuple type of value, so I'm going to put them inside the brackets like this and my tuple is ready. So these were the different ways to create tuples. Just like list, you can have nested tuples, you can have very long tuples and tuples with all the mixed values. Now it's time to understand the immutability feature of tuples. As I explained, the individual elements of your tuple cannot be modified. So now I'm going to work on the same variable, myTup. These are the values of this variable myTup. Let's try to modify one element of the tuple. Now you can see this is a type error which says that tuple object does not support item assignment. That means individual elements cannot be modified in case of tuple. Whereas in case of list, we never face such issues because it can easily update the elements at their place. Strings are also immutable because we were not able to modify individual characters of the strings. And because of this reason, all the functions or the methods which try to modify the elements of the tuple at their place. By at their place, I actually mean modifying at their memory location cannot be used with tuples. Now this does not mean that you cannot modify a tuple completely. Instead of some values that I've mentioned above, I can replace it with some tuple variable or add in some more values. And I have my tuple and this time there is no error because the tuple has changed completely. My tup variable was initially pointing to the tuple 1, 2, 3, 4 and now it starts pointing to a new tuple which consists of elements 12, 67 and 90. Let's try to perform some operations on tuples. Let me first create two different tuples so that I can easily perform some operations on them. By writing T1 plus T2, I am combining the elements of both the tuples and this can be stored in a different tuple variable also. So plus is performing the task to concatenate. Now let's see some examples. If I write here T1 plus and I try to write 2, it gives me error because concatenation operator in case of tuples require both the values to be of type tuple. T1 plus 3 again gives you error because 3 is not a tuple. But if I write here T1 plus 3 comma, in this case T1 will now have this extra element in the end 3. But this does not update my variable T1 because it is just an expression which is going to take values of T1, add 3 to them and displays it on the screen, or you can store it in some variable. T1 is not modified. Next is the use of replication operator. So I can multiply it by 3 and the elements have been duplicated 3 times. Next is the use of relational operators, T1 greater than T2. This compares the elements one by one. So T1 has element 1, 4 and 6 whereas T2 has the elements 8, 7 and 5. So the first element of T1 is compared with the first element of T2. Because 1 is not greater than 8, the condition becomes false in the first place itself and the false value is returned. But if the values of the first element of both the tuples were same, then it will proceed to the next element and will continue to do so until it finds a larger or a smaller element depending upon the operator that we are using. Let's have one more example of relational operator. So this is going to compare two tuples. Because both the tuples are not equal, it returns a true value. Here are different functions that can be applied on tuple, and because these functions do not modify the elements of a tuple in their place, they can be easily applied on all the variables of type tuple. Len gives you the number of elements of a tuple. Max, min, sum, they're all similar to what we have done in case of list. Last, we have sorted function. It is different from the sort method because sort will change the elements. Let's see some examples to understand sort and sorted function. T1 is my tuple. If I write here T1 dot sort, sort is a method, that's why I'm using it with dot operator. Once the statement gets executed, it returns an error, which is attribute error. That means this sort cannot be applied on your tuple. When we use the sort method with list, the elements are changed at their memory location, whereas tuples would not allow you to do this. So that's the reason I'm going to use sorted function with tuple, sorted T1. The output of this sorted function is a list with all the elements arranged in ascending order. You can also use one argument inside this sorted function, which is reverse, and by default the value of this reverse is false. You can make it true to get your answer in descending order. You can store this output in some variables also that will be of type list. Now we have methods of tuple. Index method gives you the index of a particular element. Let's see how. So I'm going to use tuple T1 dot index. Now I've used this index method and I was trying to check the index of element 2. As you can see, there is no element 2 available in T1. So this returns a value error because the value is not available. So now I'm writing T1 dot index and 4. 4 exists in my tuple, which is at index 1. Next we have the count method, T1 dot count, which will count the occurrence of a particular element. Because all the elements are occurring only once, so this will return one value only. All the methods or the functions that were applicable on list for the deletion of the elements cannot be used on tuples because again, the same reason, the elements cannot be modified in case of tuples. So now to delete an element, let's say if I write one statement T1 of 2, I am trying to delete the element at second index, it will return an error that it does not support item deletion. So you can remove or delete a tuple completely by writing this. This is the del statement. Now, if I try to check T1, it does not exist because this del statement has completely removed the variable T1 and therefore you will find a name error which says it is not defined. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. The link for the worksheet can be found in the description box. If you like the video, please click the like button. Subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for latest updates. Till then, keep working with smile.